And welcome to another edition of South Texas Crossfire. This is Attorney Joe Flores reminding you to join us each and every week right here on KTMV with the Lopez family. Special thanks to Don Humberto Lozano Lopez. We honor and venerate him, and he passed away in 2011, but this is for him and the Lopez family. And you guessed it, my good friend, Carlos Lopez, the Ted Turner of South Texas Broadcasting. I have the honor of being here in my hometown in Jim Wells County with our United States Congressman Filemon Vela. Welcome, Congressman. How are you?
Good to see you, Joe.
Well, Congressman, it's an honor to be here, but more importantly, let's zoom back. Why are you here today with the veterans of Jim Wells County?
Well, we had a veterans job fair that was sponsored by the Alice Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Small Business Administration, and other stakeholders who are here to help our vets get the services and the benefits that they need. We're here to let the vets know what was available to them. We, of course, have staff in Alice, Jose Pereda, and any veteran who lives in our district, we're there to help. The way the congressional rules are set up, you have a congressional office can help a veteran in their district. So if you live in Congressman Farenthal's district, his office is there to help. If you live in my district, our office is there to help. We send letters of support. We call the VA clinic so we can set up appointments. We do whatever we can to help individual vets in our district. Of course, in the Coastal Bend area and beyond the Coastal Bend, I represent Gonzales County, Goliad, B County, the western part of San Patricio County, Jim Wells County, and Clayburgh counties.
Well, and let me ask you this, a lot of people, this may be their very first in-depth interview in Alice, Texas, and in San Patricio, and they know you very well in the Valley, but I'd like to talk about your family, your education, and your background a little bit, sort of reintroduce yourself after the campaign.
Well, sure, I was born in Harlingen, raised in Brownsville, went to Georgetown University and graduated there in 1985. Went on to law school in 1980 and graduated from the University of Texas in 1987. I was married to my wife, Rose, and we lived in Corpus Christi for about 21 years. And I moved to Brownsville about 2.5 years ago. We enjoyed our time in the Coastal Bend, made many friends in Corpus Christi and Alice, and today I had the pleasure of seeing folks that I hadn't seen in a while from San Diego. I wish I represented Duval County as well because I enjoyed spending time with the good people there. But I was elected to Congress in November of the last year. I began my term in January, and for the last 7 months I've been doing everything I can to represent my constituents well, and we're here on August recess and looking forward to getting back and doing even more work.
Well, you've got a rich family history. I had the honor of meeting, and I'm a federal practitioner. I had the honor of meeting your father, Filemon Vela, B. Vela Sr., who is a federal judge, and your mother also still alive and well, and she is former mayor of Brownsville.
That's correct.
So tell us a little bit about why you wanted to enter from private sector into public service.
Well, my father and mother were dedicated public servants for a long time. I was in the private practice of law for 22 years, and as Texas's population grew, in the last redistricting cycle, we gained 4 new congressional seats, and one of those was created to anchor a district out of Cameron County and encompasses the districts all along the Coastal Bend up to Gonzales, like I earlier discussed. And you know well, we've been friends for a long time, and the decision to run for Congress was one that we thought through very carefully with many friends, and including you and other people that have been very supportive over the years. And what I can tell you is that it's been a privilege to represent South Texas in Congress, and I'm committed to doing everything I can to represent the constituents that I'm there to work for. And most importantly, I want people in our district to know that our office is there to help. Every day we help veterans with disability benefits, with their VA clinic claims, senior citizens with Medicare and Social Security issues, and that's what that's one of the very gratifying parts of the work we do.
Well, let's kind of delve into that, talking about the work, being inside the Beltway in Washington. And one of the reasons you're here is to stay grounded with your constituents. But being over there, it's a different ball game. Full contact sport, as they say, politics. But to get things done, tell us a little bit about a typical day that Congressman Vela goes through,
Well, first of all, let me say that the approval rate of Congress before I got there was 12%, and now it's 17%.
And ode to Filemon Vela, the congressman, yes. Yeah, well, I knew you would bump it up. And lawyers are right there with him. But there are actually my personal experience visiting with you and with Congressman Blake Farenthold, that you all are truly the real deal. You guys really want to help your constituents. And you threw out the red carpet for us as you would for anybody. But a typical day, I don't think people realize how stressful and how many ways you're being pulled apart. So kind of tell us a little bit about the day just to get a snapshot.
I like to think that Congress is not as dysfunctional as those polls suggest. But I can tell you that, well, first of all, I have to thank my staff, because my staff, both at the district level and in Washington, D.C., are on the front lines of helping our constituents, whether it be on the issues we talked about, like helping senior citizens and veterans with individual case needs, or in Washington, helping local governmental agencies. Like not too long ago, I was with the city manager here in Alice, and of course there's issues that he has with federal agencies. So my staff in Washington is very committed to helping our local stakeholders all the way from Brownsville to Gonzales, navigate the federal agency system. Those are some of the things we do, but a given day just depends on what's going on. There was a few days during the month of July where we were voting up till near midnight. What'll happen, the Republican majority decides what bills are going to come to the House floor. And a bill may come to the House floor, and it may be accompanied by, as many as 17 to 20 amendments. And so you vote on every amendment in a 2-minute fashion. And sometimes it takes a long time after giving a full day of debate on each and every amendment. So it's an exhilarating job. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun at the same time. And, I invite constituents to watch C-SPAN. You kind of get to see it at work. Or come to Washington and visit us, and we can explain to people on the spot what we're doing on any given day.
Well, and I think that people that I encourage anybody who can to go to DC and take it all in, and then it kind of all comes together as you go and visit your congressman and see what the process is about. We got a couple of minutes before our break, but I wanted to offer you an opportunity to kind of segue into what issues are really at the forefront right now that you're passionate about, and then we take our break and come back on, because I really want to get into some of the meat and potatoes of that.
Well, there have been two issues that have been real important to me over the last 7 months. And one is we're suffering from a severe drought in South Texas. And we have a water treaty with Mexico. It's the Water Treaty of 1944, and it's very generally set up so that in the California-Arizona border, we're obligated to send water to Mexico yearly. We comply with those obligations year in and year out. On the South Texas border, it's the other way around. Mexico is obligated to send us water. They're 2.5 years, they're 400,000 acre feet behind their deliveries, 2.5 year into a 5-year cycle. And that was one of the issues that we worked real hard on over the last 7 months, and will continue to work hard. And then of course there's immigration reform. The Senate came out with a bill that proposed a 13-year pathway to citizenship that was conditioned upon hundreds of miles of more border fencing, which we don't need, because the fencing that we have has not worked. and expanding the size of our Border Patrol agents to numbers never seen before, when we can't even take care of the Border Patrol agents that are working for us now. We're not providing them very simple equipment that they need, even gasoline, so that they can get from one place to another. So the border security provisions in the Senate bill were misguided. And so going forward, what's going to happen is we have a bipartisan gang of 7 in the House, 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans, who are working on a separate package that we hope to see in September.
Well, we're going to take a brief break, and you're watching KTMV, South Texas Crossfire, right here on Lopez Broadcasting, and you're here watching United States Congressman, your congressman here in South Texas, Filemon Vela. We're going to take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about more important issues like immigration and also health care when we come back.
Have you been arrested or are potentially facing criminal charges? You need a trial attorney who is well-versed in the courtroom. Joe Flores has handled hundreds of criminal cases and many of them to trial. Joe Flores can provide you with competent representation to protect your constitutional rights in state and federal court. Joe Flores can help if you have been arrested or facing criminal charges. The law offices of Joe Flores, equal justice for all.
Hi, this is attorney and board-certified nurse practitioner Joe Flores on behalf of Vasquez Flores Home Health. Nursing homes have their place, but having care in your own home is very important. Call today for more information. Backed by over 20 years of experience, registered nurse Priscilla Vasquez can answer your questions about home care. Call 881-9922. That's 881-9922 today.
Have you or a loved one suffered a stroke, heart attack, unexplained low blood pressure, or death during dialysis? The FDA has issued warnings and recalled the product GrandeFlow and Naturalite used in dialysis. At least one national company failed to warn the public that over 900 people had suffered cardiac arrest or death. A condition called metabolic alkalosis developed, which may have caused the harm. Call the law offices of Joe Flores today. With a combined 25 years of experience in the medical field and as a trial lawyer, Joe Flores can help. Call now.
And we're back after a brief break. You're watching South Texas Crossfire right here on your station, KTMV, for Latinos and everybody else. Bienvenidos a todos mis amigos que están aquí escuchando and seeing me right here on KTMV Lopez Broadcasting, over 50 years of broadcasting experience. Again, I welcome my good friend and your congressman here in South Texas, Jim Wells County, down to the valley, all the way up. You know where he is. San Pat, everybody. Big shout out there for him. Filemon Vela, welcome back, Congressman.
Good to see you, Joe.
Well, Congressman, we left off a little bit on immigration. I think that's on the forefront of everybody's mind. I just want to generally, because I'm not an expert on it, I'm sure you're getting a lot of information from a lot of different experts. Who better than the source to talk about immigration? Please take it away. What's going on with immigration in Washington?
Well, I think probably the best thing to do right now is summarize what's the state of immigration reform in Washington right now. And I'll go ahead and repeat some of what we mentioned earlier, because I think that it's important to know, in order to get it into perspective, know what's going on in the Senate and what's going on in the House. So in the Senate, we know we had a bill that passed through the Senate, and I've talked about how horrible the border security provisions were in that particular provision, and I spoke out against those border security provisions, and of course still feel very strongly about that. But I have some faith in one of the processes that are taking place in the House. You have two things going on. You have a bipartisan gang of 7, which includes Democrats Javier Becerra, Luis Gutierrez, who is one of our nation's strongest immigration reform advocates, Zoe Lofgren from California, and John Yarmouth from Kentucky, and 3 Republicans, John Carter from Round Rock, Sam Johnson from Dallas, and Mario Diaz-Balart from Miami. They're working on a comprehensive immigration reform plan that we expect to see when we get back into session in September. Simultaneously, the Republican leadership on the House Judiciary Committee has decided to take a piecemeal approach to immigration reform. And so we can expect to see piecemeal legislation in a piecemeal fashion out of the House Judiciary Committee. Exactly what the details of either of those processes are going to look like, we don't know until we see the final copies of those pieces of legislation. So we're going to see some movement going forward through the fall, but that kind of begs the question, are we going to see comprehensive immigration reform by the end of the year? The truth is we don't know. We just have to kind of wait and see what happens through the next few months because it's a very difficult process. You have to remember there's 435 people in the House of Representatives. If it was a House of one representative, it'd be easy because you could go in and write the bill and you'd be voting all alone on it. But when there's 435 people that have to, 218 of whom have to agree on a package, it makes the process very difficult.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, that it is a difficult situation, but certainly we've gotten some traction in immigration where we were 2 years ago. I would venture to say that because of the results of some elections and the strong attitudes of and perceptions of many Latinos in the United States, this is a primarily Latin station, but we also welcome all our brothers and sisters of all colors and creeds to watch. And we know that immigration is a very, very important issue, not only for employers, but also for, and the Valley. Tell us a little bit about how it impacts you down in the Rio Grande Valley, as well as up here, especially, and we're going to be talking about immigration as it pertains to the economy and agriculture, but tell us, boots on the ground, how this is affecting things right now.
Well, let me answer your question this way. When we go back in September, there are a group of border congressmen from Arizona to El Paso and all along the Texas border that will be filing legislation that's going to have three components. One is a pathway to citizenship, but not an onerous pathway to citizenship. We're talking more in lines of a 6-year pathway to citizenship.
Okay.
With border security provisions that are not nearly as harsh as the Senate bill. In fact, there is border security legislation that passed out of the House Homeland Security Committee on a bipartisan basis. It's not perfect, but remembering that we have to engage in compromise, it's a much better plan than what we saw at the Senate. At the same time, those of us who live on the border recognize that our economic relationship with Mexico, I tell people that our borders were meant to circulate, not to be divided. My mother was born in Harlingen, Texas, went to elementary school in Matamoros, and of course lived the rest of her life here and raised a family. As I was growing up in Brownsville, Texas, I had friends who were born in Brownsville who were living in Matamoros because that's where their parents were. They came to college, at SMU, Texas Tech. They're back practicing as lawyers, doctors, working as stockbrokers, teachers in Brownsville. And, but their parents live on the other side of the border, so we come and we go back. And so this idea that we should be a divided border just doesn't make any sense to those of us who live on the border. 6 million United States jobs depend on trade with Mexico. So what those of us, some of us that live on the border are suggesting is that when you talk about immigration reform, let's talk about a pathway to citizenship. Yes, let's talk about border security. That's rational. But also, let's talk about our economic trade relationship with Mexico. We have a bipartisan legislation pending in the House, the Public-Private Partnership Bill, filed by Congressman Quaid and Congressman McCall. We have the Port of Entry Infrastructure Act, it's called the Ports Act, which I filed, which provide $1 billion a year in Port of Entry infrastructure. It's authored on the Senate side by Senator Cornyn. And so what we're suggesting is that these three things all go together, and that's the message that we're going to be taking back to Washington when it comes to immigration reform in the fall.
Well, yeah, and it sounds like you have bipartisan support. You're working closely with both sides of the aisle, and you know, Senator Cornyn on that. You know, there is a broad base of support. The border, it's a lot different than somebody, say, in the Midwest or somewhere, you know, talking and buying into the rhetoric about the rhetorical analysis about border issues. But here, you've got people that are 6 million jobs, and these 6 million jobs are all across the border throughout the United States?
All across the United States. Of course, you're familiar with the story of Representative King from Iowa.
Yes.
Who talked about illegals having calves the size of cantaloupes. We had to remind Representative King that in his own state of Iowa, Iowa has a $4 billion a year trade relationship with the country of Mexico. Mexico is Iowa's second largest foreign trading partner. So I think there is a lot of educating that needs to take place. I think we who represent border districts have an obligation to educate our colleagues in other parts of the country about how serious of an economic relationship we have with Mexico. I want to go back to something you mentioned. It's true we have bipartisan support for the economic trade issues that I've discussed, where the problem arises is that we don't necessarily have bipartisan agreement on the specifics of the pathway to citizenship. We don't necessarily have in the full House agreement on the border security provisions that have been worked on. We know we have a bipartisan agreement on the Homeland Security Committee, but that doesn't really translate into full support for that provision in the full House. That is yet to be seen. So, you know, the challenge is in getting bipartisan support for the touchy issues, which are the pathway to citizenship and the border security provisions.
Well, I'm glad you brought that out because, you know, especially in a person like yourself that grew up on the border and saw the many American dreams that were achieved by people that had parents from Matamoros, that became doctors, lawyers, stockbrokers, teachers, as you mentioned. And so what's the real analysis here that people that are watching, that'll be watching on YouTube and the internet, and you'll be sharing nationwide, what's the real analysis that they need to also look at? There has to be a balance in the equation. What would you tell them about their, you know, anti-immigration stance, if they have one like that?
I think that we have to remember the historical and human side of our people on both sides of the border. My great-grandfather came back in the 1860s. My other three sets of grandparents came when many other people did during the heart of the Mexican Revolution in the early part of this century. And today, there are still people coming in this room. My district director, Trey Lewis, is going to marry in November his wife Ingrid, who's an American citizen but raised in Matamoros, and she teaches at San Benito Elementary, one of the elementary schools in San Benito. So this joint relationship on both sides of the border is something that has been occurring for over 100 years. And I think it's important that we allow those traditions to continue and allow those traditions to evolve. And right now, there are some people in this country who probably don't understand that. And so they take the perspective is that they want to divide it. You know, I say, some folks say, let's go build fences. I say, let's tear the fences down, and what we should be doing is building more bridges.
Well, and I agree with that. I think that Latinos throughout the nation, 40 million, showed that it can rock an election on many fronts. And so we therefore want to underline that this show is primarily for Latinos, but that we also are a nation of immigrants. We've got a couple of minutes left that I wanted to ask you about just generally on healthcare. We're kind of worried about that because your constituents here, many of whom receive hospice care, home health care, many of whom are on Medicare and are fearful that there is already a lack of providers in the rural areas. What's going to happen, or what's the good and bad news, I guess, or just the general news on health care here as we sit here and entering into the fall of 2013?
Well, in the district that I represent, especially along the southern border, we have some of the largest numbers of uninsured people in the country. So to the extent that the Affordable Care Act will provide insurance for folks that have never had the opportunity to have it, it's a very good thing. By the same time, knowing that the Affordable Care Act, or a good portion of it, will be rolled out this coming fall, there are some challenges. I think that the administration acknowledged that when they delayed the mandate for businesses for another year. This is a subject matter that probably deserves another show. As we come back, when we come back in September, I'll be able to lead your audience to our official website, which will have a list of information and guidelines, so that if people need to learn more about how the Affordable Care Act is going to affect them, we'll be able to show them where to go.
Well, thank you, Congressman, and I always say, and thanks to your staff, to Jose and Trey, they're great with me and with all of us at KTMV. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I talk way too much, you know that. So I want to give you the floor to talk with your constituents face to face and enter their homes. As you are well aware of knocking on doors, thousands of them. You're coming into 300,000 doors right now. What would you like to tell your constituents?
Well, what I'd like to tell the KTMV audience is that I represent the counties of Clayburgh, Jim Wells, San Patricio, B, Goliad, and Gonzales. One of the most gratifying parts of my job is being able to help the veterans who deserve our country to back them up for everything they have done for our country, for the senior citizens who need help with questions regarding Social Security and Medicare, and other issues that may arise for individuals who live in my district. And I invite them to call Jose Pereda at my office. It's 956-544-8352. We're there to help anybody in my district that needs it, and we don't want anybody to be shy about calling us.
And just really quick, we're going to be putting up your Facebook, and that way they can friend their own congressman. We've come a long way where you can actually be friends with your congressman right there on Facebook and Twitter, and they're also going to visit your website. We'll be putting up all those links, Congressman. Is there any other number, or how about in DC if they just want to, or write you? We'll put up all that information, but a quick email or to your staff?
Well, the best way to get a hold of us if you want to call in the district is 956-544-8352. We also invite you to call our office in Washington, D.C., and that is 202-225-9901. Or you can visit our official House website. It's the house.gov website that would appear on the internet. And there are email functions that allow you to email our office on any issue of concern.
Well, thank you so much, United States Congressman Filemon Vela. Congratulations again on the great job you're doing.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, we're gonna. That's it for us. Dave is saying that the cameras are smoking. We're out of time, but we are going to bring back the congressman, and this is but the beginning of a few great talks on educating our constituents right here in South Texas. Thanks to the Lopez family and everyone making it happen, and thanks to our sponsors. Thank you all, and God bless.